Why did she hesitate, with the rifle already raised, and the man's laughter echoing against the ancient stones of Buckingham Palace? No one in the crowd noticed her eyes tremble behind the mirrored visor. No one saw the tiny scar beneath her jawline, or the way her thumb lingered a fraction too long over the trigger guard. They only saw the spectacle, a disrespectful tourist mocking the Queen's guard, and one soldier who suddenly, inexplicably, lifted her weapon in reply. Silence fell like a blade. For a heartbeat, London itself seemed to stop breathing. But she didn't pull the trigger, not yet, because this wasn't about the tourist, it was never about him. The woman beneath the bearskin hat and immaculate crimson tunic wasn't truly a guard at all. Her name was Elise Rowan, Captain Rowan to the few who knew the truth, and this was no ceremonial post. It was a front, a shield, a trap. And the disrespectful man laughing in her face was bait. 3 months earlier, Elise had been standing on a windswept tarmac in Kandahar, Afghanistan, the smell of burnt sand and jet fuel heavy in the air. She had worn a different uniform than desert fatigues, not parade dress, and cradled a different rifle, one she'd known intimately since her first mission 8 years ago. She had been a sniper once, one of the best. From rooftops and ruins she had ended conflicts before they began. A single pull of the trigger had stopped bombers, saved patrols, ended wars before they bled into city streets. But the one time she didn't pull it, the one time she hesitated, 17 people died. 17. She still remembered their faces, their names, their families. And every night since, she had asked herself the same question: why didn't I shoot? Maybe because the target had been a boy no older than 15. Maybe because she had seen something in his eyes that reminded her of her little brother. Maybe because, deep down, she was tired of taking lives just to save others. It didn't matter. Orders were orders, and she had failed. The inquiry had cleared her of wrongdoing. Her superiors had even called her decision understandable. But she had never forgiven herself. That's why, when the covert branch of the Royal Protection Command offered her a second chance, an undercover assignment tied to a credible threat against the monarchy, she didn't hesitate. She said yes. Now, 3 months later, Elise stood motionless in the heart of London, surrounded by tourists who had no idea the centuries-old ceremony before them was anything but routine. Her rifle, a genuine SA-80, chambered and ready, was not loaded with blanks. Her earpiece, disguised beneath the ornate chinstrap, hummed with coded chatter. And her mission, watch, wait, protect, was far more dangerous than anyone would ever know. The man mocking her, leaning too close, waving his phone in her face, was not a threat. He was a distraction meant to mask the movements of someone else, someone in the crowd who was. "Bravo 2, eyes on," came a whisper in her ear. "Copy," Elise murmured without moving her lips, still scanning. "Package ETA 3 minutes, confirm readiness." She shifted slightly, the kind of subtle movement no tourist would notice but every operative nearby would understand. Ready, watching, waiting. Her gaze swept the crowd, families, students, couples, cameras everywhere, and then she saw it, a flicker of something off. A man near the fountain, black coat despite the warmth, no phone, no photos, eyes darting too much. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing steadied. It's him. But then something unexpected. A girl 6, maybe 7, blonde curls, a blue balloon, running toward the man in the coat. He flinched, looked down, reached into his jacket. Elise's finger found the trigger, her body tensed. And then nothing. The man smiled awkwardly and handed the balloon back. Not the target, not yet. Her pulse returned to normal. She exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay in the present. This was the part of the job no one talked about, the stillness before the storm, the weight of not knowing. Every second stretched like a lifetime. Every false alarm dragged old ghosts out of the dark corners of memory. Don't miss it again, she told herself. Not this time. When Elise had joined the military, she told herself it was about duty, about service, about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. But that was only part of the truth. The deeper reason, the one she never said out loud, was her father. He had served too, 30 years in the regiment, a soldier's soldier, the kind of man who believed in sacrifice without needing to speak it. And he had died in a bombing in Belfast when Elise was just 12. She remembered the knock on the door, the two officers in uniform, the folded flag. She remembered swearing she would make sure no one else's daughter felt that same knock. But 17 names haunted her now, 17 families who had. Not this time, she whispered again. The disrespectful tourist was getting louder. He waved his arms, mocked the guards' discipline. People were laughing, filming, a viral moment in the making. But Elise barely heard it. Her eyes were locked on a different man now, one with a messenger bag slung too tightly across his chest, one who had entered the square from the north gate 5 minutes after the crowd had gathered, one who hadn't stopped to watch the ceremony even once. Bravo 2, status on Sector 4. Contact, Elise murmured. Possible match. Confirm. Working on it. The man adjusted his strap again, too deliberate, too slow. Elise saw the outline beneath the fabric, a rigid rectangle, not a camera, not a tablet. She inhaled once, exhaled twice. Steady. Bravo 2, command needs confirmation. Is it the package? She focused on his hands, clean, no sweat, no tremor, trained. Affirmative, she said quietly. I have the package. Rules of engagement green. Execute if necessary. Execute. It was such a clinical word, cold, detached, but Elise felt the weight of it press against her chest like lead. A shot here in front of hundreds would change everything. The mission, the press, her life. But so would hesitation. The man in the coat moved closer to the palace gates, 30 meters, 25. Elise adjusted her stance just slightly, enough to line up the shot. The crowd shifted, oblivious. The laughing tourist stumbled back, suddenly realizing the rifle was no longer ceremonial. Her crosshairs aligned with the center of the bag. 15 meters. Her heartbeat synced with the rhythm of her breath. 10 meters. Her finger tightened. This is it, don't miss, not this time. 5 meters. Bravo 2, hold position. The voice in her ear snapped her out of the tunnel. It was not command. It was him, Commander Hale, the man who had recruited her. Why? She hissed under her breath. Secondary confirmation needed. New intel. Target may not be alone. Her eyes darted. Another figure, south gate. Same bag, same coat. There were two. And now, too many civilians between them. One shot could trigger both devices. Elise's breath hitched. She had seconds to decide. Take the shot and risk hundreds. Hold fire and risk thousands. Her mind split in two, soldier and human, duty and doubt. And in that heartbeat of indecision, the man looked up. Right at her. Their eyes met, his calm, calculated, hers burning with resolve. He knew. He knew she had him in her sights. And then he smiled. It was a small, cruel thing, and in that instant, Elise realized something horrifying. The disrespectful tourist, the laughter, the mockery, it had all been staged, a distraction designed to force her to reveal herself. Which meant they knew she was there. And the real plan, the real package, might be somewhere else entirely. Bravo 2 status. Elise swallowed hard. Her trigger finger hovered in limbo. She had come here to save lives, to redeem herself, to erase 17 names from the ledger carved into her conscience. But what if this was bigger? What if pulling the trigger here helped them? Bravo 2. She didn't answer, couldn't. Because in that moment, in the silence between her heartbeat and her breath, Elise felt something shift deep inside her. She realized this wasn't just about pulling a trigger, it was about trust, about instinct, about whether she still believed she could do this. And for the first time since Kandahar, she wasn't sure. The rifle wavered, the crowd murmured, the man turned away. And somewhere, beyond the reach of her scope, another plan was already in motion. She just didn't know it yet. The first scream tore through the square, before Elise even lowered her rifle. It wasn't a blast, not yet, but the kind of scream that told her something had gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. A ripple of panic spread across the crowd, cameras dropping, people stumbling over each other. Someone shouted about a bag, another yelled bomb, and just like that, order dissolved into chaos. But Elise didn't move, not yet. Her eyes stayed locked on the man in the coat, the one who had smiled at her like a ghost that knew her name. He was walking away now, casual, controlled, and most importantly, empty-handed. The bag was gone. Bravo 2 status report. Hale's voice was a low snarl in her ear. Contact dropped the package, Elise replied, already stepping forward, the illusion of ceremonial stillness shattered. We've got a dispersal event in progress. Where? Unknown. Find it now. She broke into a run, rifle low, weaving through the crowd with the practiced speed of someone who had done this before. Around her, tourists scattered like leaves in a storm, faces twisted with confusion and terror. A child cried out for his mother. A woman tripped and was trampled by fleeing feet. But Elise's eyes scanned for one thing only, the bag. Black canvas, no branding, heavy enough to bulge slightly at the bottom, last seen at the man's side 5 seconds ago. Where was it now? Think Elise. He had been walking northeast, toward the gates. He dropped the bag somewhere between here and there. Then she saw it, propped neatly against the base of a fountain, almost invisible beneath a discarded stroller. A choice position, central, unobstructed, and right beside the highest density of civilians. Exactly where you'd want maximum damage. Command, I've got eyes on the package. Stand by for EOD. There's no time, she snapped. We're under 3 minutes, maybe less. Negative Bravo 2, do not approach until. But Elise had already moved. She'd disarmed explosives before, but never in the middle of a royal courtyard with hundreds of screaming civilians around her. Her training told her to wait for the bomb unit. Her instincts told her there wasn't enough time. She trusted the latter. Dropping to one knee beside the bag, she gently pulled the strap back and opened the flap. And froze. There was no timer, no wires, no explosive. Just a cheap old laptop wired into a mobile signal unit, and a blinking green light. This isn't a bomb, she whispered. It's a relay. Say again, Hale barked. They staged a fake device to trigger a network signal. This was never about a detonation. Then what was it? Elise's stomach turned cold. They're trying to breach comms. Our whole perimeter might be compromised. And then, as if on cue, her earpiece crackled and went dead. The silence in her ear was more terrifying than any explosion. It meant they were blind now, cut off from command, cut off from surveillance, cut off from each other. And if she couldn't talk to her team? They can't talk to us either, she muttered. She scanned the square again, forcing herself to think like the enemy. The bag wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to distract, to overload, to break their coordination, which meant whatever was really coming was coming now. And then she saw it. A black SUV rolling past the perimeter barricades, too slow, too deliberate, its tinted windows revealing nothing. The kind of vehicle you'd miss in chaos. The kind of vehicle that shouldn't be anywhere near a restricted zone. Goddammit, Elise stood, rifle raised. Not today. The SUV didn't stop. It rolled past two panicked officers and came to a halt 30 meters from the palace gates. The driver stepped out, middle-aged, business suit, unarmed. He held up an ID card and shouted something about special clearance. But Elise wasn't watching him. She was watching the back door. It opened, and a woman stepped out, calm, poised, mid-40s, with the kind of cold authority that screamed not civilian. She glanced briefly toward Elise, and in that instant, Elise's blood ran cold. She knew that face. They all did. Adira Volkov, former GRU, architect of 3 major covert strikes across Europe, wanted in 12 countries, and according to every intelligence file Elise had ever read, presumed dead. What the hell, she breathed. It didn't make sense. If Volkov was here in London in broad daylight, this was more than terrorism. It was geopolitical, strategic, personal. And then Volkov smiled, a faint, knowing curve of the lips, and raised a phone to her ear. The green light on the laptop turned red. The explosion was small, controlled, but enough to knock Elise off her feet and blow out every window facing the courtyard. Not a bomb, a pulse. Her comms didn't just go down, everything did. Cameras, drones, palace security grids. Even the encrypted feed from MI5's observation center blinked to black. Power failure, someone screamed. No, not a failure, a reset. Elise staggered to her feet, coughing through the dust. Her rifle was gone, her ears rang, her vision swam. But through the haze, she could still see Volkov. Still calm, still smiling, still waiting. And then, as if this were all part of a carefully rehearsed play, a black transport van pulled up behind the SUV. 4 men in tactical gear jumped out, each carrying an identical case. Volkov gestured toward the palace gates. The men started walking. Elise's legs moved before her mind caught up. She snatched her rifle from the ground and sprinted across the courtyard, ignoring the pain in her chest and the shouting behind her. "Stop," she yelled, though no one could hear her. "Drop the cases." One of the men turned. His hand went to his weapon. Elise fired once, the shot slicing past his arm and forcing him behind cover. The others scattered, but not away, forward toward the gates. And that's when Elise realized the awful truth. They weren't trying to breach the palace. They were trying to enter it. "God, no," she whispered. This wasn't an attack. It was an infiltration. The next 30 seconds were a blur of motion and instinct. Elise vaulted a bench, dropped to one knee, fired again. 1 man down, 3 still moving. The air filled with the sharp crack of suppressed return fire, bullets splintering the stone beside her. Civilians screamed and scattered. Sirens wailed in the distance, too far, too late. She slid behind a marble pillar and reloaded, her hands trembling despite the years of muscle memory. This was what she was trained for: controlled violence, calculated force. But she had never been this alone. And in that lonely, breathless silence, a voice she hadn't heard in years crept into her mind. "You're not a soldier, Elise. You're a shield. Remember that." Her father's voice. And for the first time since Kandahar, she felt it, not just the pressure of duty, but the weight of something deeper. This wasn't about redemption anymore. It was about promise. "I promised no one else would get that knock on the door." She stepped out from behind cover and kept moving forward. One of the remaining operatives reached the gate control panel. Elise fired, missed, and the man slammed a small device onto the locking mechanism. Sparks flew. The steel doors clicked. "Open!" 2 men slipped through. Volkov followed. Elise was 20 meters behind. 15, 10. "Volkov," she shouted. Her voice was raw, ragged, desperate. "Stop." The Russian turned, just enough to meet her gaze one more time. And in that single glance, Elise saw something that shook her more than any weapon ever could. Pity. Not hatred, not fear, pity. as if she were a child trying to stop a storm with her bare hands. Then Volkov stepped inside the palace, and the gate slammed shut. Elise pressed her palms against the cold iron bars, breath heaving, heart hammering. She had failed again. The infiltrators were inside. Communications were down, and she was locked outside the very building she had sworn to protect. But there was something Volkov hadn't accounted for, something Elise hadn't told anyone. Not yet. There was a reason she'd been chosen for this assignment, a reason she'd been placed here, specifically in this sector. Because deep beneath Buckingham Palace, beneath the centuries of stone and ceremony, was something few people even knew existed. A secondary access tunnel. And Elise knew exactly where it was. She turned away from the gates, rifle slung over her shoulder, and began to run. The fight wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time she wouldn't hesitate. Not for a second. Not again. Why was the tunnel door sealed shut, and why did it feel like someone had been there before her? Elise stared at the rusted steel hatch beneath the palace's eastern courtyard, breath heavy, uniform soaked from the rain that had begun to fall. Her hands shook as she keyed in the old access code, a sequence she'd memorized years ago during a joint op with the Special Reconnaissance Regiment. It should have opened immediately. It didn't. Once, twice, 3 times. "Come on," she muttered, punching the code again. Still nothing. That wasn't possible. The tunnel had been decommissioned decades ago. Only a handful of people even knew it existed, and all of them were on her side, or so she had believed. Then she saw it, a tiny red diode glowing faintly above the lock, a wireless receiver, new, recent. Someone had rewired the access system. Her stomach twisted. Whoever was inside had known she'd come this way. 10 minutes earlier, she'd left the chaos of the courtyard behind, the screaming civilians, the shattered windows, the hollow silence of dead calms. London sirens still howled in the distance, but backup was too far away. And every second Volkov's team remained inside the palace increased the chance they'd reach what they were after. Elise knew what that was now. Operation Silent Throne. It was a phrase she'd overheard 2 months ago, in a redacted brief meant for senior eyes only. It referred to a covert NATO intelligence summit, held not in a secure facility or a bunker, but in the bowels of Buckingham Palace itself. If Volkov gained access to that summit, she wouldn't just be stealing secrets. She'd be planting them, altering them, weaponizing them. And the West would never even know. The lock clicked. A low mechanical hum rolled beneath her boots. Slowly, the door creaked open. The tunnel smelled like dust and damp stone, a forgotten artery beneath a kingdom built on centuries of power. Elise switched on her flashlight and descended the narrow iron staircase, every step echoing louder than she liked. Her rifle hung against her chest, safety off. The darkness pressed close around her. It was quiet down here, too quiet. Halfway through the corridor she saw it, footprints, muddy, fresh, leading deeper into the palace. She wasn't the first one in. 15 minutes. That's how long it had been since Volkov vanished behind the gates, long enough to breach 2 security layers, long enough to compromise the summit, maybe long enough to escape entirely. But Elise refused to believe it was over. She followed the prince deeper into the tunnel, past forgotten storerooms and sealed-off chambers, past the old escape hatch used during the Blitz, past walls older than the nation itself. And with every step, memories surfaced. Her father had told her stories about this place, about how kings and queens had hidden here during war, how spies had smuggled documents through these halls. He used to say that beneath the palace lay not just stone and brick, but history itself. "Protect it," he told her once, "even if no one knows you did." She never understood what he meant back then, but she did now. The first body was slumped against a maintenance door, British security shot through the chest. The second was a technician, unarmed, execution style. Elise's jaw tightened. Volkov's team was moving fast and clean, too clean. Then came a sound, faint, metallic, deliberate, a boot scraping stone. She killed her light, raised her rifle, held her breath. Another sound, closer this time. Someone was waiting. Captain Rowan. The voice drifted out of the dark, accented but calm. Russian, male, you're persistent. Come out, she said quietly. You shouldn't be here, you're already too late. Then why are you still here? A low chuckle, because I'm the one sent to slow you down. And then the corridor exploded into gunfire. She dove behind a stone arch as bullets chewed into the wall beside her. Dust filled her lungs. Muzzle flashes flickered like lightning in the dark. Whoever he was trained, tight grouping, controlled bursts, not some hired thug. FSB, she thought, or worse. She waited for the pause, the half-second lull when a shooter breathes before the next burst. Then she rolled out, fired 2 rounds low, 1 high. The silhouette staggered, a muffled grunt. But he wasn't down. A flashbang clattered against the floor. Elise barely had time to look away. White light, deafening roar. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, and through the haze a figure lunged. They collided hard, crashing into a steel bulkhead. His knife slashed past her face. She drove her knee into his ribs, twisted, elbowed him in the throat. The blade clattered to the ground. He was strong, heavier, faster, but she was desperate. And desperation has a strength all its own. She slammed his head into the wall, once, twice. A third time he dropped. Slowing me down, she rasped, breathing hard. Not today. She stripped his sidearm, checked the mag, and pressed forward. The tunnel narrowed into a vertical shaft, an old maintenance lift long since sealed. The control panel was dead, but the ladder bolted to the side was still intact. Elise climbed, 20 feet, 30, 50. At the top, a service hatch. She pushed it open carefully, emerging into a dimly lit subbasement lined with power conduits and network servers. A faint hum vibrated through the floor. And then she heard voices. Final upload sequence complete. 30 seconds until handshake. She'll never reach us in time. Elise crouched low, heart hammering. The voices were coming from a chamber up ahead, a secure data vault once used to store classified encryption archives. Volkov was inside. And if the handshake they mentioned was what she thought it was, they were about to establish a direct uplink to NATO's classified communication backbone. They wouldn't need to steal intelligence. They could rewrite it. 20 seconds, maybe less. Elise checked her mag, 12 rounds, 1 flashbang, 1 knife. It wasn't enough. She swallowed hard. Fear crept in sharp, unwelcome. She felt it before on rooftops, in deserts, in that cursed alley in Kandahar. But this time it wasn't fear of dying. It was fear of failing again. 17 names. She still remembered everyone. Not again, she whispered. She crept forward, pressing herself against the frame of the vault door. Inside, 3 operatives worked at a console, fingers flying over keyboards. 2 more guarded the entrance. Volkov stood in the center, watching a progress bar crawl across a screen. And for a moment, just a moment, Elise hesitated. She could wait, call for backup, secure the perimeter, play it safe. But safe had cost 17 lives once. She wasn't going to let it cost millions now. The flashbang clattered into the room before the guards even saw her. The blast blinded them. Elise moved. 2 shots sent her mass. 1 man dropped. Another turned, firing wildly. She ducked behind a server stack, bullets tearing through cables inches from her head. She fired back 1 round too, a third guard down. One of the techs reached for a pistol. Elise's knife found his shoulder before he could aim. The other bolted for the far door. She shot him through the leg. Only Volkov remained. The Russian turned slowly, unbothered by the chaos around her. "Impressive," she said softly, "but you're still too late." The progress bar hit 100%. A soft chime echoed through the vault. "Data bridge established." Elise's stomach dropped. "What did you do?" Volkov's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We didn't come for the summit, we came for you." "What?" The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the vault. Emergency lights kicked in, red, pulsing, ominous. Elise spun, rifle raised. But Volkov was gone. The screen still glowed, lines of code scrolling too fast to read. It wasn't just a data breach. It was a beacon, a trace. Her position, her identity was being uploaded. Every mission, every covert op, every classified detail. They were burning her life to the ground. And then the screen displayed a single message. "The past always finds you, Captain Rowan." Her hands trembled, not from fear, from rage. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was personal. Volkov hadn't come to win a war. She'd come to destroy her. And she was succeeding. Elise stared at the blinking cursor, at the data pouring into the void, at the ghosts of her past bleeding into the present. Kandahar, the hesitation, the 17 names. All of it exposed. But not finished. She took a breath, and for the first time since the mission began, her mind was utterly still. Volkov had made one mistake. She left Elise alive. And that was going to cost her everything. Why was the message still blinking, even after she cut the power? Elise's fingers hovered over the severed fiber line, heart pounding, breath ragged. She had smashed the terminal, ripped the network cable out of the wall, even fired a round into the server stack. None of it mattered. The code kept flowing. The uplink was still live. Somewhere deep in the system, Volkov had built a backdoor, and now Elise's entire life was bleeding into the ether. Come on," she muttered, typing override commands from memory. LOCKALL engage, core protocol /shutdown. Nothing worked. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat, taunting her. She had minutes, maybe less, before every intelligence agency in the world knew who she was, where she'd been, and what she'd done. Before they knew about Kandahar. Before they knew about the boy. Before they knew she'd hesitated. And yet, something about the message on the screen gnawed at her. "The past always finds you." That was Volkov's voice. It was too poetic, too deliberate, too personal. This wasn't just a hack, it was a message. To her. "Bravo 2, do you copy?" The comm channel, dead for nearly half an hour, suddenly hissed to life. The signal was weak, broken, but Hale's voice was there. "I'm here," Elise said, pressing a hand to her earpiece. "Status." "Vault compromised. Volkov established a data bridge. They're pulling my files." "Your files?" Hale's voice sharpened. "That's impossible, your record is." "Sealed, I know, but somehow they found it." There was a pause. "Elise, are you saying they know about Kandahar?" "Not yet," she said, "but they will." "Then you need to get out, now." "Negative," she said, voice steady. "If I run, this follows me forever. If I stop it here, it dies here." "Elise, that's an order." "I'm done following orders that leave ghosts behind." Silence, then make it count. She scanned the room again, every wire, every port, every light. Volkov's team had gone, but their work was still here, humming silently in the dark. Her eyes landed on the far wall, a failsafe breaker for the palace's subterranean grid. If she blew it, the resulting surge would fry every connected system, including the data link. It would also likely bring the entire palace security mainframe crashing down, a career-ending move if she lived to explain it. She hesitated, the weight of it heavy in her chest. "Do it," a voice inside her whispered. "End this. Burn it all if you have to." But another voice, quieter, older, cut through. "We're not here to destroy, Ellie. We're here to protect." Her father, always her father. She lowered the rifle. Destroying the system might stop the leak, but it would also cripple every defense the palace had left, and Volkov was still inside. There had to be another way. Then she noticed it, a narrow terminal tucked behind the main server stack, shielded from the blast she'd fired earlier. It wasn't part of the uplink. It was monitoring it. A trace route. Elise's breath caught. If she couldn't stop the leak, maybe she could follow it. The keyboard was Russian-made. The interface, custom-coded. But Elise had spent enough nights buried in SIGINT briefings to know what she was looking at. A relay path, 2 proxies, then a direct link somewhere in London. Volkov wasn't sending the data overseas. She was sending it locally. That changed everything. If Elise could find the receiver, she could kill the transfer at the source. She memorized the coordinates and bolted from the vault, boots hammering against the old stone floor. The tunnels were darker now, eerier, their silence broken only by the distant echoes of footsteps, hers or someone else's, she couldn't tell. When she reached the old service hatch again, she didn't stop. She climbed fast, 2 rungs at a time, until she emerged into a forgotten chamber beneath the north wing, a space no tourist or staffer would ever see. The receiver was less than a kilometer away. Above ground. The rain hit her like needles the moment she surfaced from a concealed maintenance exit. Night had fully fallen, and with it, a new kind of chaos. Sirens screamed across London. Emergency lights bathed the palace grounds in red and blue. Helicopters circled overhead like vultures waiting for the dying to stop moving. And somewhere not far from here, Volkov was finishing what she started. Elise wiped water from her eyes and started running. Past barricades, past overturned benches, past the shattered remnants of a day that had started with laughter and ended with blood. Her chest ached, her legs burned, but she didn't slow down. Because this wasn't just a mission anymore, it was everything. The coordinates led her to a quiet street near St. James's Park, an unassuming 5-story office block with boarded windows and a to let sign half hanging from its door. On any other night, she'd have walked past without a second glance. Tonight, it felt like the heart of the storm. She slipped through the door, rifle raised. Inside, the building was silent. Dust coated the floors. Broken furniture lay scattered like forgotten memories. But deep within, beneath the hum of hidden generators, she heard it, the faint pulse of active servers. They're here. The ground floor was empty, so was the second. But as she crept up the stairs to the third, a new sound cut through the silence, a low, steady voice. Russian. Bridge complete. Extraction window 6 minutes. Prepare asset transport. Elise pressed herself against the wall and listened. There were at least 4 voices, maybe 5, heavily armed by the sound of their gear. And one of them sounded familiar. She edged closer, peering through the cracked door at the end of the hallway. Her breath caught. It wasn't just Volkov's team, Hale was there too. For a moment she thought she was hallucinating. Her commander, the man who'd recruited her, trusted her, saved her, was standing beside Volkov, calm as stone. He spoke quietly, pointing at a map. She responded with a nod. This wasn't a hostage situation. This was a meeting. And suddenly, everything made sense. The access code that had failed. The comms that died too precisely. The mission that always felt like a setup. This wasn't a breach. It was a trade. Volkov wasn't stealing data. Hale was selling it. And Elise, the decorated sniper, the loyal soldier, the woman trying to erase 17 ghosts, was the bargaining chip. Her file, her name, her past, her existence was the leverage. She should have felt rage, betrayal, hatred. Instead, all she felt was hollow. It had all been for nothing. Every sacrifice, every scar, every sleepless night and trembling trigger pull. And yet, it wasn't over. Because Hale didn't know she was here. Volkov didn't know she was watching. And if she played this right, she could still end it. But ending it meant making a choice. She could retreat, call it in, bring the entire building down with a tactical team and hope justice was served. Or she could do it her way, silent, surgical, final. No more betrayals, no more ghosts. Just an end. Her finger found the safety catch. One breath, two. She counted them. 5 hostiles, 2 with line of sight, 1 near the server rack, Volkov by the window, Hale her mentor, her friend by the terminal. I can do this, she told herself. I have to do this. But when she tried to steady her aim, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Because deep down, she knew that once she pulled that trigger, there was no going back. Not for her, not for any of them. She exhaled slowly, closed her eyes, and prepared to become the thing she'd sworn she never would. Not a soldier, not a protector, not even a savior. Just a weapon. What if she missed? The thought slithered into Elise's mind just as the crosshairs steadied over Hale's chest. It was ridiculous. She hadn't missed a shot since she was 19. But tonight wasn't about skill. It wasn't about range, wind, or timing. Tonight, her finger trembled not from doubt in her aim, but in her heart. Because if she pulled the trigger now, the man she once trusted with her life would die before he even turned his head. And if she didn't, everything she'd built, every lie she'd told herself to stay sane, would shatter anyway. The silence in that dusty room pressed against her chest like a weight. 5 targets, 1 objective, 1 impossible choice. Then, without warning, Hale spoke. Do you think she knows? Volkov's lips curled. She's a ghost now. Even if she suspects, no one will believe her. Hale chuckled softly. You're right, they never do. The words cut deeper than any bullet ever could. They never do. It wasn't the betrayal that burned. It was the certainty in his voice, the same voice that once told her she was more than her past, that she deserved redemption. That voice was now selling her to the people who'd make sure she was erased. A tremor passed through her, anger, shame, maybe both. No more, she thought, no more lies, no more ghosts. Her breathing slowed, her vision tunneled, the crosshairs sharpened into a thin, perfect line. And then a scream. Not hers, not theirs, someone downstairs. Boots thundered against the old wooden floor, radios crackled, a voice barked in English. Metropolitan Police, nobody move. Elise flinched. She hadn't called them, who had? The room exploded into chaos. Volkov cursed and yanked a hard drive from the server rack. 2 of her men flipped the table for cover. Hale drew his pistol, faster than she'd ever seen, and started barking orders in Russian. The window of certainty was gone. The shot was gone. And now she was part of a storm that was no longer hers to control. Move, Hale shouted, pointing to the stairwell. Asset is priority 1. Asset. He meant her. They were going to cut through the police, exit through the basement, and vanish into the network of safe houses that spiderwebbed under London. Once that happened, Elise would never see daylight again. She had seconds to act, maybe less. She slid the rifle onto the floor, a weapon too slow for what came next, and drew her sidearm. Heart pounding, she stepped into the hallway and kicked the door open. Drop it, she yelled. 5 faces turned toward her, shock, confusion, then recognition. Elise, Hale's voice broke. Don't. Volkov was the first to move. She raised her weapon and fired. Elise dove sideways, the round grazing her shoulder. Pain ripped through her arm, but she didn't stop. She fired twice. 1 man fell. Another ducked behind the server rack. Screams echoed below. Police were breaching. The entire building trembled as battering rams pounded against steel-reinforced doors. Elise, Hale shouted again, you don't understand. Then make me, she hissed. This isn't betrayal, he said, his gun still raised but his voice suddenly desperate. This is survival. They were going to burn you. I was trying to save you. By handing me over. By rewriting who you are before they destroy you. Before Kandahar destroys you. The name hit her like a punch to the ribs. Kandahar, the mission they'd both sworn never to speak of again. The day that broke her. The day that made her a ghost. She swallowed hard. You don't get to use that. I have to. Hale's face cracked. Because you're not a soldier anymore. You're a liability, and they're already coming for you. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to believe every word was a lie. But in his eyes she saw something else, fear. Real human fear. Maybe he wasn't lying. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe the agency had decided she was too dangerous, too compromised to protect. Maybe Volkov was his only way to keep her alive. But none of that mattered now, because even if his intentions were pure, the path he'd chosen was poison. Then we end this my way, she said. Volkov cursed in Russian and hurled a smoke grenade. The room erupted in a thick gray cloud, blinding them all. Footsteps pounded toward the fire escape. Hale shouted orders. Elise fired blindly, hitting nothing but plaster and air. By the time the smoke cleared, they were gone. The police swarmed, and seconds later, shields raised, rifles trained. Hands up, one shouted. Elise dropped her weapon and raised her trembling hands. The room reeked of cordite and betrayal. Who are you? An officer barked. What's your role here? She could have told them everything. She could have said she was one of the good guys, that she'd been hunting Volkov, that Hale, her superior, was a traitor. But none of it mattered without proof, and right now she looked like the only suspect left standing. I'm no one, she said softly, just a mistake. They questioned her for hours. They checked her prints, her face, her history. None of it came back clean. The sealed records, the black ops work, the erased missions. Elise Walker did not officially exist, and that made her more dangerous than anyone in their database. By dawn, they handed her off to military intelligence. Two men in suits, polite but cold, escorted her into a steel interrogation room beneath Whitehall. No names, no badges, just questions that weren't really questions. Where is Volkov? Who was your contact? Why were you in the building? Each time she told the same story, and each time they wrote nothing down. Because they already knew. They already knew Hale had flipped. They already knew the mission was compromised, and they already knew Elise had gone rogue. But instead of a cell, they gave her something else, a deal. There's a reason we haven't charged you, one of the men said at last, sliding a folder across the table. You're still useful. Elise stared at the folder. No label, no insignia, just a single word stamped in red ink, Spectre. What is this? A classified joint tasking, the man said. Off book, no oversight, no press. You go where we tell you, you do what we say. In return, Kandahar disappears. Every file, every photo, every trace. You become a ghost by design this time. And if I refuse, then you're a liability, and we both know what happens to liabilities. It was blackmail. It was manipulation. It was the same machine that had chewed her up once before. But it was also a chance. A chance to keep fighting. A chance to stop Volkov. A chance to fix the thing she'd broken all those years ago. And deep down, beneath the pain and betrayal, she knew she would take it. Not for them, not for her. For the boy in Kandahar. For the ghost she still carried. 2 weeks later, she was on a flight. New identity, new passport, new orders. Her mission, find Volkov before she disappeared again and bring Hale back, dead or alive. The rain streaked down the airplane window like falling memories. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Elise closed her eyes and breathed. She wasn't sure if she was still a soldier. She wasn't sure if she was still human. But she was still moving, still fighting, still trying. And sometimes that had to be enough. Because redemption didn't always come with medals or forgiveness. Sometimes it came with silence. and silence was something she'd learned to live with. Why was the flight so quiet? Elise stared out the oval window, watching the clouds drift by in slow, indifferent silence. The engines hummed beneath her feet, steady and constant, a sound she once found comforting. Not anymore. Every beat of the turbines was a reminder of where she was headed. Every mile brought her closer to a ghost she tried to outrun. Volkov, Hale, Kandahar, all of it. And now there was no turning back. She adjusted the collar of her civilian jacket, a nondescript black coat that made her look like any other weary passenger on the red-eye to Warsaw. But beneath the fabric, a biometric tracker pressed against her skin, and inside her bag was a burner terminal that linked her directly to an operations cell that didn't officially exist. Spectre. It wasn't a unit, not really. It was a punishment disguised as purpose, a way for ghosts like her to serve until they disappeared completely. "Tea, miss?" a flight attendant asked gently. Elise blinked. "No, thank you." Her voice sounded distant, hollow, like it belonged to someone else. 2 rows ahead, a man in a gray suit adjusted his cufflinks for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Another, across the aisle, had been reading the same page of his newspaper for nearly an hour. They weren't passengers, they were watchers. Spectre didn't trust its own assets, especially not the ones they'd blackmailed into service. Elise knew that. And yet, a part of her almost welcomed their presence. At least someone was watching. At least someone still believed she was dangerous. Because the truth was she was. She had been ever since Kandahar. "Walker." Her calm earpiece buzzed to life just as the captain announced their descent. A voice she didn't recognize spoke, calm, precise, almost mechanical. "New coordinates uploaded. Contact package has changed." "Changed?" Elise whispered. "I was supposed to rendezvous with a field officer in Warsaw." "Your handler has been compromised. New insertion point is Kaunas, Lithuania. You will proceed via overland transport. Travel under alias Anna Griegorov. Confirm receipt." Elise checked her burner tablet. Sure enough, the digital route had updated, new name, new path, new risk. "Confirmed," she muttered. "Walker." "Yes." "Do not deviate, and do not attempt to contact Hale." The line clicked dead. She stared at the silent screen for a long time. Then, almost involuntarily, whispered the name to herself. Hale. The man she'd once trusted more than anyone. The man who had betrayed her. The man she'd been ordered to bring in dead or alive. She didn't know which option she was dreading more. The air in Warsaw was colder than she remembered. Gray skis stretched endlessly overhead, and the wind carried the faint metallic smell of rain and rust. Elise blended into the crowd at the station, just another traveler hauling a worn-out duffel and avoiding eye contact. Her train to Kaunas left in 30 minutes. She bought a ticket under the alias, found a seat near the back, and sank into the faded cushion. But she couldn't shake the feeling. She was being watched. Again. A reflection in the glass, a man leaning casually against a pillar, hands in his pockets, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. He wasn't reading, wasn't scrolling, wasn't moving, just watching. Not Spectre, not police, something else. She shifted her gaze without moving her head, scanning the rest of the platform. A woman with a scarf too heavy for the weather. A teenager pretending to tie his shoe for far too long. A man pretending to sleep on a bench but breathing too shallow. They weren't amateurs. Volkov's watchers. Her pulse quickened. She boarded the train, heart hammering. The watchers didn't follow immediately. Maybe they weren't sure. Maybe they wanted to tail her instead of intercepting her. But halfway through the journey, she saw one of them step into the carriage, the man from the pillar. He didn't sit. He didn't move. He just stood at the far end, watching. And for the first time since Kandahar, Elise felt something she thought she'd buried for good. Fear. Not of dying, she made peace with that years ago, but of being seen, of being exposed, of the past clawing its way into the present. She reached into her coat pocket and brushed her fingers against the cold metal of her sidearm. Her mind ran through scenarios: disembark early, slip through a freight exit, make contact with Spectre remotely. Then the man smiled, a small, mocking, knowing smile, and vanished into the next car. Kaunas was darker, emptier, a city that looked half forgotten, its Soviet bones still showing beneath new steel and glass. Elise stepped off the train and into a drizzle that felt colder than the rain in London. Her contact point was a safe house near the river, an abandoned textile mill repurposed as a forward base. Spectre agents would meet her there. That was the plan. But plans rarely survived contact with reality. She reached the mill without incident, no tales, no watchers. The building loomed silent and hollow against the night sky. A single light flickered behind a boarded window. She approached the side door. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, the coded signal. The door creaked open. And there he was. Hale. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain whispered against the tin roof. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Elise's heart thudded like a drum in her chest. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "Waiting for you," Hale said calmly. She raised her pistol. "Don't. If I wanted to kill you, Elise, you'd already be dead." "That's not comforting." He raised his hand slowly. No weapon, no threat, just the same tired eyes she'd once trusted with everything. "I didn't betray you," he said softly. "I tried to protect you. By selling my life to Volkov. By making sure you'd survive the fallout. Fallout you caused." He sighed. "It's bigger than you think." "Then make me understand." Hale stepped closer carefully, like he was approaching a wounded animal. "Volkov isn't the enemy. Not anymore. The people you work for, the ones behind Spectre, they're not protecting anyone. They're preparing for something. And if they succeed, neither of us will have a future." "Lies," she hissed. "You're just trying to. They're going to erase every Black Ops operative in the system. Wipe them out. Every ghost. Every secret, including you." Her breath caught. "Why?" "Because we know too much." The room seemed to shrink around her. The walls pressed closer. The rain grew louder. Could he be telling the truth? Was Spectre really a cleanup program, not a redemption one? Was she not being sent after Volkov, but being led into a trap? "Elise," Hale said, voice breaking, "I made mistakes, but I never stopped trying to protect you. And right now, the only way to do that is to make you disappear before they erase you for good." Silence, heavy, suffocating. She didn't lower the gun, but she didn't pull the trigger either. Because for the first time since London, she wasn't sure who the enemy was anymore. And that uncertainty, more than betrayal, more than fear, terrified her. Why did his voice still sound like the truth? The rain dripped in uneven rhythms from the rusted pipes above, each droplet a hollow echo in the abandoned textile mill. Elise kept the barrel of her pistol locked on Hale's chest, but her grip wasn't as firm as it should have been. Her breathing wasn't as steady as she'd trained it to be. Because beneath the anger, beneath the rage, a small, traitorous part of her still wanted to believe him. "Erase us," she repeated, her voice tight, almost breaking. "You expect me to swallow that?" Hale didn't flinch. "You already know how this works. Deny the past, bury the evidence, burn the ghosts. You were one of their sharpest tools, Elise, but tools get discarded when the job is done." "I am the job." "No," he said softly, "you're the loose end." Her hands trembled. The safety clicked beneath her finger, off, then on again. A small, unconscious motion, but one that betrayed the chaos inside her. Loose end. Liability. Mistake. Words she'd spent years trying to outrun. And now they'd come back wearing the face of the man who'd once told her she was more than the things she'd done. "Prove it," she whispered. Hale nodded once. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat. Elise's tensed finger poised to fire, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small data wafer and slid it across the floor. It skidded to a stop at her boots. "Decryption keys in the metadata," he said. "Run it through your Spectre terminal if you don't believe me." "What's on it?" "Every order you ever followed, every mission they buried, every person they disappeared, including the ones you never knew about." Her chest tightened. "And why hand this to me?" "Because the moment you open it," he said, eyes locked on hers, "you'll stop being their weapon and become their target." She didn't trust him, not fully, maybe not at all, but curiosity was a stubborn thing. It gnawed at her even as her instincts screamed trap. Still holding the gun steady, she knelt, slipped the wafer into a slot on her burner device and waited. The screen flickered once, twice. Then lines of classified data began to crawl across it. Kandahar, Minsk, Istanbul, Damascus. Dates, names, operations she'd participated in, some she remembered, others wiped from her memory with chemicals and conditioning. And beneath them something else, something worse. Project Spectre. A single phrase stood out, glowing in red. Phase 3. Neutralization Protocol. All Spectre operatives are to be permanently retired upon mission completion. Authorization. Executive level. Retired. Not released, not reassigned. Neutralized. Elise felt the blood drain from her face. "This is real," she whispered. Hale nodded. "I wish it was." A heavy silence fell between them. It wasn't the silence of enemies anymore, not exactly. It was the silence of people who had both been betrayed by the same lie. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked at last. "Because I made a deal," Hale said. "I sold them a ghost, but I refused to let them destroy the soul inside her." "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," he admitted, "but you already know it's too late to walk away. The only question left is whether you want to die running or fight back." Something shifted inside her then, not anger, not vengeance, but something colder, sharper. Purpose. They had built her, trained her, used her, and now they meant to erase her like a line of code in a system update. No. She wasn't going to vanish quietly. She holstered her weapon. "Where, Volkov?" Hale blinked, caught off guard by the sudden change. "You believe me now?" "No," she said, "but I believe they're coming for both of us. And if we're going to stand a chance, I need the one person who hates them more than I do." "Volkov won't trust you." "She doesn't have to." Elise's tone hardened. "She just has to need me." They left the mill before dawn, moving through back alleys and abandoned warehouses to avoid surveillance. Hale knew the safe routes, old Cold War smuggling paths now used by private contractors and rogue agents. Every step of the way, Elise felt the weight of her decision pressing heavier on her shoulders. She wasn't sure she trusted Hale. She wasn't sure she should. But the truth on that data wafer had burned away the last illusions she had left. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She wasn't a ghost. She was a target. And targets fought hardest when they had nothing left to lose. Volkov's new base of operations was a repurposed oil refinery near the Baltic coast, a steel labyrinth of pipes, catwalks, and cargo containers. Getting close was suicide. Getting in was worse. But Elise had never been one for easy missions. She and Hale reached the perimeter just after midnight. The sea wind bit through her jacket, bringing with it the smell of salt and diesel. Floodlights swept in lazy arcs across the yard. Guards patrolled in pairs, rifles slung low, eyes sharp. 2-minute gap between patrol shifts, Hale whispered, scanning through binoculars. "If we move on the south side." "No," Elise's voice was steady now, almost calm. "We go in loud." Hale turned to her, frowning. "Loud, that's suicide." "It's bait," she said. "If Volkov thinks we're here to kill her, she'll run. If she thinks we're here to trade." She might listen. Elise nodded. They breached through a loading bay door, alarms screaming the second the lock blew. Shouts echoed across the refinery as floodlights swung their way. Within seconds, they were surrounded, rifles raised, boots pounding against metal. Elise dropped her gun and raised her hands. "Tell her I'm here," she shouted into the chaos. "Tell Volkov Walker wants a deal." The guards hesitated, then parted. Volkov stepped into the light. She was different now, colder, harder, but her eyes burned with the same feral intelligence Elise remembered. "A deal," Volkov scoffed. "Last time we met, you tried to put a bullet in my skull." "And next time I probably will," Elise said. "But right now we have a bigger problem." Volkov tilted her head. "I'm listening." "They're coming," Elise said. "Not for you, not for me, for all of us. Spectre's cleaning house, every operative, every asset, every name that ever worked in the shadows." A flicker of doubt, or maybe fear, crossed Volkov's face. "And you think I'll believe that?" "Check your networks," Hale said, stepping forward. "Your accounts are already frozen. Your teams are already being pulled. This isn't paranoia, it's a purge." Volkov stared at them for a long time. Then slowly she lowered her weapon. "If you're lying, I'll kill you both." "If I'm lying," Elise said, "you won't have the chance." The three of them stood there, enemies turned uneasy allies, bound together by betrayal and a single, brutal truth. The system that created them was now hunting them. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Elise felt something strange. Something she hadn't felt since before Kandahar. Not hope, not yet. But purpose. They weren't ghosts anymore. They were survivors. And survivors didn't hide, they fought back. The sky above the Baltic was a slab of dull iron, heavy with the promise of rain. Elise stared out over the refinery's upper catwalk, wind tearing at her hair, the salt sting of the sea clinging to her lips. Below, the facility thrummed with a new kind of energy, not the organized, mechanical rhythm of an oil operation, but the tense, razor-edged hum of people preparing for war. It had been 72 hours since that night in the loading bay, 72 hours since enemies became uneasy allies. Now, the refinery was no longer just Volkov's stronghold. It was their fortress. And tonight, it would become the battleground where they either erased their past or were erased by it. Volkov's voice cut through the hum of generators. "They're not going to negotiate," she said, spreading a series of satellite images and intercepted transmissions across the steel table. "Spectre, not sending a capture team. They're sending a kill unit, 4-tier strike, 0 survivors, no recovery." Elise leaned over the table. The images showed black-painted gunships moving out of Estonia, transport carriers rerouted from a NATO airbase under false orders, encrypted chatter from Spectre handlers embedded in European intelligence agencies. The operation was called Wraithfall. Hale rubbed a hand across his jaw, staring at the data with a grim frown. "They're not just coming for us," he muttered. "They're going to wipe this entire complex. No loose ends, no evidence." Volkov's lips curled into a humorless smile. "Then we'll give them something they didn't prepare for, resistance." The plan they crafted wasn't born from trust, it was born from necessity. Volkov's private army, once a shadow network of smugglers and ex-operatives, was now reinforced by Spectre defectors Hale had quietly reached out to. Most were ghosts like them, abandoned assets, burned agents, liabilities marked for disposal. Some came for revenge. Some came for redemption. None came expecting to survive. They fortified the refinery into a layered kill zone. Automated turrets from Volkov's weapons caches mounted on the high catwalks. EMP mines hidden beneath the gravel approach roads. Decoy signals transmitted from false command posts to scatter incoming drones. And in the heart of it all, a hardened server core hastily welded into a shipping container where Elise's final weapon waited, The decrypted Spectre archives. Once this goes live, Hale said, watching the upload sequence progress, Spectre's entire operational history hits every journalist, agency, and government database on the planet. They can't erase what the whole world has seen. It's not about exposure, Elise replied quietly. It's about ending their silence. The night fell like a slow blade. At 02:17, the first tremor rippled through the ground. Hale's earpiece crackled. "Eyes on the ridge," came the voice of one of Volkov's scouts. "Convoy inbound, 6 armored vehicles, 1 support drone overhead." Elise's pulse slowed the way it always did before a kill. The chaos to come wasn't chaos to her, it was clarity. Every breath, every second, every beat of her heart clicked into a precise rhythm. "Positions," she ordered. From the catwalk, she watched the convoy roll into the outer perimeter, sleek matte black transports. No insignias, no markings. The kind of men Spectre deployed when they wanted the world to never know they'd been there. Then came the whisper of rotors, 2 VTOL gunships descending from the clouds, their lights off, weapons primed. Volkov glanced at Elise. "Once this starts, there's no stopping it." "It started the day they trained us to disappear," Elise said. "Tonight, we remind them we exist." The first explosion ripped the night apart. An EMP mine detonated beneath the lead vehicle, flipping it into the air like a toy. The second transport swerved, tires screeching, and that's when Volkov's turrets opened fire, cutting through armor with heavy-caliber precision. Screams erupted through comms. Spectre's soldiers poured from the wreckage, moving with ruthless efficiency, their formation tight, their tactics flawless. These weren't just soldiers, these were ghost hunters. Elise moved among the shadows, her rifle a seamless extension of her breath. 1 shot, 2 shots, men dropped before they even saw her. Hale's voice guided the defenses over comms, calling out flanking routes, adjusting turret angles. "Left flank breached, 2-man team with breaching charges." "On it," Elise replied, sprinting down a narrow catwalk. She vaulted a railing, rolled behind a cargo crate, and fired. The breaching team collapsed before they could reach the door. "Drone deploying countermeasures, targeting main server hub," someone shouted. Volkov grabbed a shoulder-mounted launcher and stepped into the open, fearless. 1 rocket streaked into the sky and detonated the drone midair in a burst of fire and shrapnel. The refinery became a storm, gunfire, explosions, smoke, and steel. The kill team advanced with terrifying precision, but every meter they gained was paid for in blood. Still, Elise knew it was only a matter of time. "Secondary wave inbound," Hale warned, scanning a thermal feed. "Air insertion, 6 contacts descending on ropes. They're heading for the server core." "They want the evidence," Elise said. "If they destroy it, none of this matters." She broke into a sprint, boots clanging on steel grates, heart hammering against her ribs. The rain had begun to fall in earnest now, cold, relentless sheets that turned the refinery into a maze of slick metal and hissing steam. At the center of the facility, she found them, 6 Spectre commandos breaching the container doors with plasma cutters. They moved like she once did, silent, efficient, emotionless. For a moment she just watched them, reflections of what she'd been, of what they'd made her. Then she pulled the trigger. The first commando went down in a burst of red. The others scattered, returning fire. Bullets screamed past her head as she dove for cover, reloaded, and kept firing. 1 by 1, they fell, but not before one of them hurled a thermite grenade toward the server. "No," she shouted, lunging forward. She kicked the grenade back just before it ignited, the blast searing the floor but sparing the data core. When the last commando lay still, Elise slumped against the container wall, chest heaving. Her shoulder burned where a round had grazed her, blood mixing with rain. "Server secure," she panted into her comms. "Repeat, server secure." "Copy that," Hale replied. "But we're not done yet. Final wave inbound, 20+ heavy armor. We can't hold much longer. In the control tower, Volkov was bleeding from a cut above her eye, but her voice was calm. "They'll keep coming," she said. "They don't care how many die as long as we're erased." "Then we finish this on our terms," Elise replied. "Prep the final upload." The progress bar on the server screen crept past 92%, 93%, 94%. Every percentage point felt like a heartbeat. Outside, the storm intensified, gunfire echoing like thunder. At 99%, Hale looked up from the console. They're in the inner perimeter, less than a minute before breach. "Doesn't matter," Elise said, chambering her last magazine. "We just need 60 seconds." The door exploded inward. Spectre's final assault unit stormed the control tower, black visors glinting in the harsh light. Bullets tore through the consoles, shattering screens and ricocheting off steel. Volkov went down on one knee, firing into the oncoming tide. Hale dragged a wounded ally into cover, shouting orders into a dead comm channel. Elise moved like water sliding across the floor, firing with ruthless precision. 2 enemies fell, then 3, but there were too many. A round tore through her thigh. Another slammed into her vest, knocking the wind from her lungs. She dropped behind a pillar, gasping, blood pooling beneath her. The screen behind her blinked. Upload complete. The data was out. The truth was free. And now, all that was left was to survive the next 30 seconds. A heavy boot crashed into her ribs, flipping her onto her back. A Spectre operative loomed above her, weapon raised. "You should have stayed forgotten," he hissed. Elise stared up at him, blood on her lips, and smiled. "I was never forgotten. You just stopped looking." The shot that killed him wasn't hers. It came from behind Hale, limping, wounded, but still fighting. The operative crumpled, and Hale staggered forward, helping Elise to her feet. "Come on," he grunted. "We're not dying here." Together they pushed forward, clearing the last of the assault team. Volkov joined them, limping, one arm wrapped around her bleeding side. The 3 of them stood shoulder to shoulder amid the wreckage, enemies no more, bound now by something deeper than vengeance. Silence fell. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. The refinery was still standing. And in 100 data centers across the world, the truth they'd unleashed was spreading like wildfire, uncontainable, irreversible. Spectre was finished. Dawn crept slowly over the Baltic, pale and cold. The refinery was a scarred ruin, walls pocked with bullet holes, towers blackened by fire, but it stood. Against all odds, it stood. Elise limped out onto the catwalk, watching the horizon burn with the first light of morning. Hale joined her, silent for a long time. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," she let out a long, tired breath. "Now they come for us in the open, no more shadows, no more silence." "And us?" She turned to look at him, at the man who had once been her enemy, now perhaps the only person who understood her. "We keep fighting," she said. "Not for them, not for Spectre, for everyone they tried to erase." Volkov approached from behind, a cigarette dangling from her lips, eyes on the rising sun. "Funny," she murmured. 3 ghosts with nothing left, and somehow we might have just changed the world." "Not ghosts," Elise said softly. "Not anymore." The wind shifted, carrying the cries of distant sirens, governments scrambling, agencies denying, old allies turning on each other as the truth tore through the walls of power. It was just beginning. And for the first time in years, Elise felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Not rage, not vengeance. Hope. The silence that had defined her life was gone. And in its place, there was a voice, her voice, echoing across the world. "The end."